Hey everybody, welcome back to theclinicaltrialsguru.com. Again, it's theclinicaltrialsguru.com. I want to thank and a special shout out and a thank you to everyone who joined me on my first webinar, my live Google Hangout webinar. I think we had like 10 or 11 people, maybe a dozen or so. And I'm impressed because I was expecting very few people on there, like one or two maybe, because I sent an email out last night, like at midnight, announcing it today at 3 p.m. Pacific time. So I figured not too many people are going to get it, or it's too short notice. Well, I was surprised and want to thank all of you guys who were on it, and the ones who weren't. Luckily, when you do a Google Hangout webinar or any kind of Google Hangout, it gets saved to YouTube automatically. So it's on my YouTube channel. Check it out. Today's video is important. It's from a question I received. And a lot of people seem to be confused about the difference between risk-based monitoring and remote monitoring. So I got interviewed by a magazine the other day in this industry. I won't mention which one because I don't know if I should. But they asked me to explain the differences between risk-based monitoring and remote monitoring because they were using these terms interchangeably. And I told them it's not correct. It's not entirely correct. You can have a risk-based monitoring study and still have on-site monitoring visits. In fact, most risk-based monitoring studies still have on-site monitoring visits. So the easiest way to think of this is risk-based monitoring is like the whole thing, right? It's a concept, and remote monitoring is just one part of that concept. So you can have a risk-based monitoring study with remote monitoring, or a risk-based monitoring study without remote monitoring. The remote monitoring part, whether the CRA comes to your site or does not come to your site, does not indicate whether the study is a risk-based monitoring study. Okay, so all remote monitoring means is whether the CRA actually physically comes to your site or whether he or she reviews your data through online databases, e-portals like Intralinks, VIA, or other electronic databases that they set up, electronic platforms that they set up to look at your source data, verification, regulatory documents, startups, all that stuff. What risk-based monitoring is something that sponsors and CROs came up with to be more proactive when they monitor certain protocols. So rather than wasting their time source data verifying everything, which they never get around to doing anyways, at best they do like 90% source data verification. So rather than spending their time source data verifying everything, they leave it more to the site to have their own internal quality assurance systems in place should they ever get audited by the FDA or the sponsor or the IRB or another regulatory agency. So they leave the onus on the back of the research clinics to actually have internal QA systems, and they need to make sure that they're 100% source data verified. What the CRO will send the highly paid CRAs out to do, because it's very expensive to send a CRA out once a month to a site, sometimes more than that if it's a high enrolling site, and just go through everything. They're not able to keep up with all the source, especially at these high enrolling sites. They're not able to verify 100% of the source data that they're getting and then match it up with the EDC. So they use things like trends, like risk trend analysis. So they look at areas where sites are either causing a lot of protocol violations or there's certain safety issues going on with study participants, and then they look at certain adverse events of interest, or maybe serious adverse events of interest, or certain data points of the study that are of interest when they crunch the numbers, and they have people in the background. When you enter something in that EDC system, you have people back there crunching the numbers and gathering all that data and then trying to make some sense out of it, and then being more proactive and telling the CRAs, hey, when you go out to this site, this is what we want you to focus on. So that, in a nutshell, is risk-based monitoring. The idea is to look at the pain points of a particular protocol, the parts of the protocol where they anticipate sites to have a lot of problems, or where they anticipate a lot of adverse events to occur, or maybe a lot of protocol deviations that they could possibly avoid. So it's a more proactive approach. And yes, it's true, as more risk-based monitoring studies come out, you're going to have less on-site monitoring visits. So that's where the remote monitoring comes in, and that's where people get confused because they both start with the letter R, and they both have the word monitoring in them. So that's why people incorrectly use these two terms interchangeably or synonymously. It's not the case. Yes, risk-based monitoring will eventually lead to more remote monitoring. So you'll have less monitor visits at your site, maybe more remote monitoring visits where you're using some online tools like, again, Intralinks Via, which a lot of my sites are already using and they're being proactive, or their own platforms that they're setting up, but a lot of them are indeed partnering with Intralinks Via and the like. So hopefully this helps clear up the confusion, the difference between remote monitoring and risk-based monitoring. Okay. Thank you for the questions, and actually this one wasn't a question from one of you guys, but thank you for watching. Keep your questions coming in. I will answer them. Dan at theclinicaltrialsguru.com, and take care.